Welcome back to the session on energetic hygiene for nervous system stability. Many conversations about nervous system care focus on tools and techniques, but today we're exploring something just as essential but not often talked about: energetic hygiene. Julie Baldino will share about energetic hygiene, how porous boundaries, energetic clutter, and ungrounded space contribute to overwhelm, and how simple, intentional clearing practices can support greater nervous system stability. It's great to have you at the summit, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. When you talk about energetic hygiene, I think it's a term that most people aren't used to. What are you actually referring to?
I'm referring to clearing anything and everything from your life that causes dysregulation, and then having practices in place on a daily basis to make sure that you're in the right mindset and that your boundaries are clear and your energetic space is clear.
Okay, so that's pretty important. That's
Hmm.
broad. So many people feel on edge a lot of times without knowing why. How
Yeah.
can energetic clutter of ungrounded spaces play a role in those feelings?
Um, I want to tell you a story from my personal experience because
Oh,
when you first asked me to do this, I've gotten the greatest lesson of my life in this in the last year and a half. So
okay.
when you first asked me to do this, I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm probably the worst person to talk about this because I'm coming out of the most dysregulated 2 years of my life where kind of all of my practices were set aside to survive." So, but then I thought about it more and I thought, actually, I'm the perfect person to talk about this because having had decades of experience with very solid, grounded spiritual practices, daily habits, I was able to live in a completely dysregulated state. And now I'm at ground zero and I can talk about coming back from ground zero. so, so I think the first thing that comes to mind is removing the source of the dysregulation from your life. And I think oftentimes we don't know what that is until we do. And then sometimes that decision is really difficult. For me, it was removing a very angry husband from my house. And I didn't even realize that was the source of the need for me to constantly have spiritual practices and rituals to keep myself regulated until he was gone. And then I literally slept for 10 days once that happened because my body was so tired. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm here, I've been trying to fix myself and have all these practices and do all these things. But the real problem was actually inside the home.
What an
So, yeah, yeah, yeah. And you really don't know until you can separate yourself from it. But once you do, I think the peace starts to flow in and you kind of realize why you were doing everything all along because it was keeping you sane. So, number one is remove the source of the dysregulation.
okay.
Yeah.
So, what are some subtle signs that the nervous system was being affected by the environment or the energetic load? So, was this more retrospective than really recognizing it in the moment?
I love that you asked that question because there were very clear signs. One of them, and it took somebody else to notice it in me. Um, One of them was I startle really easily. Like when a door opens or somebody walks up the stairs, I would jump like 2 feet in the air. And I never knew why that was until my daughter came home from college with a psychology degree and she walked up the stairs, opened the door. It scared the crap out of me like it always does. And I jump and go, oh. And I said, gosh, Cassie, I'm so sorry. I don't know why my body does that. And she said, that is from decades of living with an angry man.
Wow. From
Yeah.
the mouths of babes, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had recently been diagnosed with ADHD late in life in my 40s, which actually turned out to be CPTSD, because the doctor didn't kind of know what they were looking for, and it wasn't until I saw a domestic violence expert that deals with CPTSD assessments that she was like, it's this is not ADHD. This is trauma being inflicted on a daily basis for 20 something years. So it was her noticing that. It was a friend noticing my fear in a vehicle, because I was used to being a passenger with an angry driver, and trying to reassure. It was just things like that that came up over and over again, where it was pointed out that my behavior or my level of fear or hypervigilance was abnormal. And I had to kind of start looking at, well, what was the root? What was the root of that? So,
That's really interesting.
yeah,
So let's talk about, so for you, because it was part of a lifetime of it, it was your normal until
yeah,
someone pointed out to you that it wasn't normal. You saw it
yeah.
as normal in the moment.
Yeah, because I've always been pretty like, I wouldn't say high strung, but I'm constantly moving. I'm working or I'm cooking or I'm organizing or I'm taking care of dogs or I'm always doing something. And what I realize now is that was a distraction from actually dealing with what was really happening. And now that that situation has been removed, I notice that I'm able to be more present. I'm able to receive joy, to feel pleasure. I can even see colors brighter and smell things greater, because it must do something to your brain to block stuff like that. So, those protection mechanisms that we use to keep ourselves feeling like we're regulated also block out like everyday pleasures and joy in life.
Well, that's really interesting
Hmm.
observation.
Yeah.
So the term trauma informed,
Yeah.
that's used a lot. What
Yeah.
does it truly mean in practice, not just as a buzzword? I feel like you're the perfect person to speak to this.
And I was always very cautious of that, just because I'm a conscientious healer, and I realized that touch is not for everybody. I realized that certain language patterns are not for everybody. What I think I learned over the last year is part of being trauma informed is not healing people when you're in active trauma. And so I have not performed any healing sessions for well over a year, because my nervous system simply could not do it without kind of inflicting some of my stuff on clients. So, I think touch is a big one. Requesting permission, consent, using language that's not going to incite trauma or trigger people, um, but also knowing your own boundaries and your own limits as far as what you can do for people.
Okay, that's really interesting to me that you paused your practice for a year with that because your practice was just so much a part of who you were.
Yeah,
And
it was. Yeah.
yeah, and in some ways a distraction at times did you use it for, or did you consciously recognize that, hey, I'm not in the right space to be doing this?
I did consciously recognize that. And how I recognized that was I couldn't fathom helping someone. I just did not have the energetic space. I couldn't give anymore because there was so much being pouring into what I was dealing with. Um, and I had people call me in crisis, and I referred them to somebody else because I knew that I couldn't do it. And I think that, part of me doing it, it did help me, I think, to help other people, when I wasn't looking at what was actually going on in my life, it,
Mhm.
but when I had to actually sit with it and deal with it, I knew that I didn't have the space to do it for other people for a while. I just got to the point where I feel like I could, and
Okay.
it's been a year and a half.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
For people who are really sensitive and empathic, which I feel like you fit into that,
Mhm.
what's especially important to understand about those energetic boundaries for people who are out there?
So when I was doing healing sessions on people before I took the break, one of the things that I had to do was before a session, and I never know what I'm getting into. I don't know who's coming in. Sitting alone with myself in quiet for 10 minutes and just preparing myself. And I noticed that I would either come out of a session really um, overwhelmed with sadness. One particular situation was a person that I treated who had just lost both their parents.
Mm.
Um, and then, or I would come out really energetic, I think it was because that was the emotion that came from the person during the session, and so sitting in meditation for 10 minutes before, and then sometimes doing grounding work after, and or using singing bowls to clear my energy, or bells or smoke, or whatever it is that your preference. I had to have some kind of a ritual after to feel like I had cleansed my space.
Okay, so from your perspective, how does energetic hygiene differ from like mindset work or emotional processing?
I think it's the physical embodiment of that. It's having a physical action to go with the intention or the mindset. For me, um, I'm a doer. And so just, and I also, I am against like ignoring what is ugly with mindset shifts. I think we need to sit with that for a little bit. And I have an example of this. I was working with a healer during this whole period and really trying to come to grips with what had just happened to me. And she said to me, and she's a great healer. This was just the wrong approach to take with me. She said to me, I need you to imagine this person as a small child so you can look at his innocence again. And I had this realization that I couldn't do that because the only way to get through this was to be angry and to fight. And so I think a lot of times when we look at things in terms of mindset shifts, we gloss over kind of what we need to deal with or what we need to survive, which for me, it was being fired up. I knew at the end of this, I'm going to figure out a way to shift out of this mindset. But while I'm in survival mode and getting through this horrible period, that's where I need to be. so, so I think it's the coupling of the physical action with the intention or the mindset shift.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, especially from a really visceral, personal level, because there's a lot of people out there experiencing very, very, very similar things. And you, people, it's important to be mindful of the shift of where it takes that person. When you start getting into guilt and shame and all of those kinds of things, I love that you recognized it very consciously for you specifically, that you were sort of in the fight for your life, it sounds like, in
Hmm.
the moment,
Yeah,
and you needed to be supported in that space. Maybe
yeah.
5 years from now, you might be able to revisit that with a different conversation, but not in the moment
Hmm.
right now.
Yeah, yeah. That was my survival, and I think that collectively, particularly in the United States, we are dealing with a, a lot of abuse type behaviors from our government. And so, I mean, so this kind of affects a lot of people. Before there was just this percentage of women who were domestic violence victims, but we're all experiencing it right now. And not to get political, but a lot of the behaviors that we see in our federal government are on the abuser checklist. The gaslighting, the deflecting, the projecting, it's all part of it. So and that is going to trigger a lot of different emotions out of people, and a lot of people get reactive and they get angry. And I think you need to kind of sit with that before you say, good vibes only and move on, because you need to know where it's coming from and how to process it and deal with it.
Yeah, I would agree with you that the politically correct can create um, its own problems because it's taking the victim and putting them in a box and not acknowledging their truths with it. So the word
Hmm.
be spoken, and kudos to you for being willing to say that. And from that perspective, how does one take care of themselves in this? When we're talking about, porous energy and energy boundaries, what can we do every day? I had a laugh when you talked about the smoke because before the summit, I was walking around, the office where I do my recording in with my Palo Santo and, you know, smoking myself, smoking the computer, smoking the microphone, doing all that kind of stuff. But I think most people don't think about those things and the
Hmm.
effect of it. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. Speaking from experience over the last year, the best advice I can give is you do what you can. Because for me, I had to set aside a lot of my daily things, and my practice became sitting on the floor with my dogs for 5 minutes at night, or taking an extra long walk instead of maybe preparing an altar or laying in the crystal healing bed that I have behind me, because my brain couldn't focus long enough to do that. And I think I see a lot of people who get really angry with themselves because they can't meditate, or they can't journal every day. So you do what you can, and you apply it to other areas in your life where you become present. And for me, it's being outside, it's being at the beach. Again, it's being with my animals, it's being with my new partner and just sitting and not saying anything. It doesn't have to be a ritualistic practice. It can just be something that makes you grounded and present, and whatever you can handle at the time. And I think at the end of this, I had to, I think about it all the time, like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this forever. One thing I did do was follow the moon phases. I did do that. That was a practice that I kept up because it was really important to me. But lastly, I had to give myself grace for not doing all of the things and just doing what I had to do to survive.
Talk a little bit about that. Giving yourself grace. Those are such powerful words. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that I'm one of those people that is very critical of my daily habits, and having I have my shit together. Like everybody that I know is like, what do you mean? You're so zen, you so have your shit together. You must do X, Y, and Z every day. And for a long time I did, because that's what I had to do to survive inside of this household under the circumstances. But once that was gone and I went into fight mode, I did have to stop myself and do something, but I didn't have the energy to do all of the things. So at the end, I had to stop and say, okay, I'm not going to punish myself for a year and a half of not practicing what I preach, because all I could do was take a walk, or all my brain could manage was sitting with my dogs or taking them outside to brush them, which in itself can be a spiritual practice. So to I had to give myself grace in a way that I had to forgive myself for not doing all the things, and just say, it's okay. You were surviving.
Kudos to you. I think that that's a missing piece to the puzzle for so many people is they're always willing to give other people grace, but themselves not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I've told people that over the years, who have said things to me like, I just can't meditate, I can't sit still, or I can't get into a journaling practice. And that might not be your thing. It might be something else. It might be getting outside. It might be hugging a tree. It might be putting your bare feet in the dirt. It might be doing nothing one day. Like for me, when I finally got the angry man out of the house, I slept for 10 days. And I was really hard on myself because I took those 10 days, but then I had to say to myself, my body was freaking tired. Like I had to give myself those 10 days. Thank God I had help, but you just have to go easy on yourself when you have to pivot from your practice, incorporate something else, or put yourself in a different mindset to survive.
Good. So you talked about two really important things, getting rid of the angry man
Hmm.
and what's happening socially, politically in the
Hmm.
environment where we're residing at right now. And it's not just the US, it's countries all over the globe. So it's not
Hmm.
unique to us. So for people, what are your thoughts on how we can help them discern to carry what's theirs, but recognize
Mm.
what isn't? Because I think that was part of your journey was you didn't recognize
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
wasn't. Sounds like just in this brief conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. With regard to what is going on to the world, I had to tune it out. Because I did not have the energetic space to take it all in. And I know that in the state that I was in, there was nothing I could do to resolve any issues at that level. Even in a grounded state, there might be nothing I can do to resolve those bigger issues. So, at the risk of being politically uninformed, or people thinking that I might not know what's going on, there were plenty of times where I had to completely tune it out, with regard to what is going on in the news and the world and everywhere else. So yeah.
Okay, I think that that's part of energetic hygiene for sure,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we're being blessed with so much from so many different directions. It's hard to believe our time is almost up here. So as we wind down, what's one small shift in an energetic boundary or environment that someone could experiment with today just to help support their nervous system stability a little bit?
I've got a big one for this, and Kate would agree with this. One of the very first things that I did was clean up my space. I made that my mission to get my house clean and beautiful and decorated like I wanted to. And it wasn't buying anything, it was moving.
Wonder if we have a little bit of a bandwidth problem. So I want to thank Julie. Nervous system care honestly doesn't have to be complicated. When we tend to our energetic hygiene with awareness and choice, we give the body permission to settle, ground, and return to balance, one small practice at a time. So thank you, Julie. I appreciate how authentic you were and your willingness to share today.